Valerie sat rigidly in the courtroom, her gaze fixed on Leon across the polished oak table that separated them like a chasm. For a fleeting moment, it felt as though she was seeing him for the first time. Not the man she had married 12 years ago, but a stranger cloaked in familiar features. His sharp jawline, once softened by laughter during late-night talks, now carried a smugness that twisted her stomach. 12 years of marriage, 2 children, Steve and Rose, and now this bitter, jagged ending. His eyes gleamed with a triumphant glint, as if he'd won some grand prize, and that smugness cut deeper than his infidelities, deeper than the countless humiliations she'd swallowed to keep their family intact. A family, she realized now, that only she had ever truly wanted. Leon leaned back in his chair, his tailored suit crisp and unrumpled, exuding an air of victory. He was leaving her, leaving their life, for Annabelle. Young, radiant Annabelle, with her confident smile and effortless charm, who Leon believed understood him in ways Valerie never could. Valerie, who had poured her soul into their home, into raising Steve and Rose, into building a life she thought they both cherished. She glanced at Leon's hands, folded casually on the table, and remembered how they used to cradle their children. Now those same hands seemed indifferent, as if Steve and Rose were no longer his blood, his legacy. "Valerie, you okay?" her lawyer, Duana English, whispered, her voice a low hum of concern. Valerie managed a tight nod, though her throat burned with unshed tears. She couldn't afford to unravel here, not in front of him. Across the room, Leon's lawyer murmured something in his ear and he smirked, a flicker of amusement crossing his face. Valerie's chest tightened. Did he even think of Steve, who idolized him? Or Rose, who still asked why Daddy was gone so often? Apparently not. Child support? Oh, he'd pay it, begrudgingly of course, the bare minimum required by law. Enough to keep the court off his back, but not a cent more, not when Annabelle's wants loomed so large in his new life. Valerie imagined Annabelle's sleek apartment, filled with expensive trinkets Leon would happily provide, while Rose's worn-out ballet shoes went unreplaced. The judge's gavel struck, a sharp crack that echoed in the hushed courtroom. "The court grants the divorce as stipulated," the judge intoned, her voice steady and clinical. "Custody of the minor children, Stephen and Rose, is awarded to Ms. Valerie Carter, with Mr. Leon Carter to provide child support, as outlined. Visitation rights to be determined per the agreement." The words washed over Valerie like a distant tide, as if they belonged to someone else's life. She stared at the grain of the table, tracing its swirls with her eyes, unwilling to meet Leon's gaze again. "Valerie," Duana said softly, touching her arm. "It's over. You did what you had to." "Did I?" Valerie's voice was barely a whisper, raw with doubt. She thought of Steve's quiet anger, Rose's tear-streaked face when she'd explained why Daddy wasn't coming home. Had she fought hard enough? Had she failed them by letting it come to this? Leon stood, adjusting his tie with a practiced flick, and spared her a single glance, not of regret, but of dismissal. The courtroom felt stifling, the air heavy with the finality of it all. 12 years of shared life, hopes, dreams, promises, had collapsed like a brittle house of cards, leaving Valerie hollowed out. The gavel's echo still lingered in her ears, but what came next was a twist even her seasoned lawyer, Duana English, hadn't anticipated. As the judge prepared to adjourn, Leon cleared his throat, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the courtroom. "Your Honor," he said, his tone edged with a confidence that made Valerie's skin prickle. "There's one more thing." Annabelle, standing just behind him, leaned in, her glossy lips curving into a faint, encouraging smile. Valerie's stomach churned. What now? The judge, a wiry man with silver hair and a perpetually furrowed brow, peered over his glasses. "Yes, Mr. Carter." Leon shifted in his seat, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "I'd like to request the return of certain gifts I gave Valerie during our marriage. Expensive ones." He shrugged, as if it were a casual afterthought, They're of significant monetary value. A stunned silence blanketed the room. The judge blinked, his frown deepening, and removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. I'm sorry, Mr. Carter. Could you clarify what you mean by gifts? Leon leaned forward, unfazed. Jewelry, for starters. Like the emerald necklace I got her for our 5th anniversary. The diamond earrings from the podium. Oh, and the antique silver bracelet she always wore to those charity galas. There's other stuff too. A crystal vase, some designer handbags. They're worth a good amount and, well, I'd like them back. Valerie's breath caught, her heart pounding so loudly she thought it might echo in the room. She stared at Leon, searching for some trace of the man she'd once loved, but all she saw was a stranger, his eyes cold and calculating. This wasn't just petty. It was a deliberate jab, a final twist of the knife to humiliate her. She glanced at Annabelle, whose smirk was barely concealed, and realized this wasn't just Leon's idea. It was a performance orchestrated to strip Valerie of even the smallest remnants of their shared past. Duana's pen froze mid-note, voice a fierce whisper. This is absurd. He has no legal standing to demand gifts back. Let me handle this. But Valerie barely heard her. The audacity of it, Leon standing there, listing off tokens of a life they'd built together like items on a garage sale list, left her reeling. The emerald necklace, a gift after a tearful reconciliation when Steve was born. The earrings bought on a whim during a rare moment of joy. The bracelet, which she'd worn to feel strong at events where she played the perfect wife. These weren't just objects, they were fragments of her heart, now being haggled over in open court. The judge cleared his throat, his expression a mix of disbelief and irritation. Mr. Carter, gifts given during a marriage are generally considered the property of the recipient. If you're seeking to reclaim these items, that would require a separate hearing, with proper documentation and valuation. This court isn't the place for itemized disputes of this nature. Leon opened his mouth, but before he could respond, Valerie's voice rang out, steady despite the tremor in her chest. Your Honor, there's no need for another hearing. The room stilled. Duana's head snapped toward her, eyes wide. Valerie, don't. Valerie raised a hand, silencing her lawyer. She stood, her posture rigid, and faced the judge. I'll return everything. The necklace, the earrings, the bracelet, the vase, the bags, all of it. He can have them. The judge's brow lifted, and he leaned forward, his voice gentle but probing. Ms. Carter, are you certain? You're under no obligation to agree to this. We can address this matter formally, if necessary. Valerie's throat tightened, but she forced a small, resolute nod. I'm sure, Your Honor. I don't want to drag this out any further. She paused, her gaze flicking to Leon, who looked momentarily startled, as if he hadn't expected her to capitulate so easily. I'm done holding on to things that don't matter anymore. Annabelle's smirk faltered, and Leon shifted uncomfortably, his bravado dimming under the weight of Valerie's quiet dignity. The judge hesitated, then nodded. Very well, Ms. Carter. If you're certain, the court will note your agreement to return the specified items. I'll leave it to both parties to coordinate the details outside of court. Duana leaned in again, her whisper urgent. Valerie, you don't have to do this. This is just him trying to hurt you. Valerie met her lawyer's eyes, her voice barely audible. I know, but I'm not fighting over scraps. Let him have his trophies. I'm keeping what matters, my kids, my self-respect. The courtroom, already thick with tension, seemed to constrict further as Annabelle tugged at Leon's sleeve, her manicured nails glinting under the fluorescent lights. Leon straightened, emboldened, and fixed Valerie with a defiant stare. I want everything that cost more than $50 that I gave you returned, he declared, his voice ringing with a bravado that made Valerie's jaw tighten. He paused, glancing at Annabelle, who leaned in and murmured something in his ear, her lips curling with malice. Leon nodded, then added, and the gifts I gave the kids as well. If they cost more than $50. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Valerie's heart plummeted, the words slicing through her like a cold blade. This was beyond humiliation. It was a deliberate, calculated cruelty. She stared at Leon, searching for any remnant of the man who'd once tucked Steve into bed or braided Rose's hair for school. But all she saw was a stranger, his face alight with a smugness that made her skin crawl. The kids? He was dragging Steve and Rose into this petty vendetta, demanding the return of birthday presents, Christmas gifts, tokens of a father's love now reduced to line items on his ledger. "Are you serious?" Valerie asked, her voice low, trembling with the effort to remain calm. Her hands gripped the edge of the table, knuckles whitening. "Absolutely," Leon replied, his grin widening, all teeth and arrogance. "Everything down to the last souvenir. I've spent quite a bit on you and your offspring, and I know I can't demand money back, but I want at least the things back." He leaned back, crossing his arms, as if he'd just delivered a checkmate. Annabelle stood beside him, her smile predatory, eyes glinting with triumph. She was the puppeteer here, Valerie realized, the instigator of this grotesque display. This wasn't just about reclaiming gifts. It was about stripping Valerie bare, making her feel small, poor, discarded. Annabelle wanted her to feel the weight of what she'd lost, to rub salt in the wound of her shattered marriage. Dwana English shot to her feet, her voice sharp with indignation. "Your Honor, this is outrageous. There's no legal basis for demanding the return of gifts, especially those given to minor children. This is harassment, plain and simple." But Leon cut her off, his tone unwavering. "I'm entitled to what's mine. I'm not backing down." The judge, visibly exasperated, raised a hand. "Mr. Carter, I've already stated that such matters require a separate hearing. I strongly advise you to reconsider this course of action." Valerie barely heard them. The room seemed to blur, the voices fading into a distant hum. She looked at Leon, then at Annabelle, their smug satisfaction radiating like a toxic haze. Leon's eyes met hers, and his smile widened, as if he expected her to crumble, hoped for it even. He was waiting for a spectacle, for tears, for her to beg or rage. But Valerie felt something else entirely. Not anger, not even pain, but a strange, clarifying indifference. They were so small, so pathetic in their greed, clawing at trinkets to prop up their hollow victory. It was almost pitiable. She rose slowly, her movements deliberate, and the room fell silent. "It's fine," she said, her voice calm and firm, cutting through the tension like a blade. "I'll return all your gifts. Everything. Down to the last one." Annabelle's eyes lit up, gleaming with a feverish excitement. Valerie could almost see her mentally cataloguing the spoils, the emerald necklace, the diamond earrings, the silver bracelet, perhaps even Rose's music box or Steve's telescope, gifts Leon had once presented with a smile. Annabelle's anticipation was palpable, a vulture circling a carcass, eager to claim her prize. Leon, however, faltered, his smirk wavering. He hadn't expected this, Valerie's quiet resolve, her refusal to give him the emotional outburst he craved. "You're sure?" he asked, a trace of uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Completely," Valerie replied, her gaze steady. "I'll box it all up, the jewelry, the vase, the handbags, the kids' gifts too, Steve's telescope, Rose's music box, the books, the toys. If it cost more than $50, it's yours." She paused, letting the words settle, then added, "I hope it's worth it, Leon." The judge cleared his throat, his tone weary. "Ms. Carter, I must reiterate that you're under no obligation to comply with this request. If you wish, we can—" "No, Your Honor," Valerie interrupted, her voice unwavering. "I'm done with this. Let him have his things. I don't need them." Leon shifted uncomfortably, his bravado dimming under the weight of Valerie's composure. Annabelle, oblivious to the shift, squeezed his arm, her smile triumphant. But Valerie saw it, the flicker of doubt in Leon's eyes, the realization that he'd miscalculated. He'd wanted to break her, but instead, she was walking away unbowed. As the judge adjourned the session, Valerie gathered her purse and stood, her heart heavy but her resolve unbroken. She thought of Steve and Rose waiting at home, unaware of their father's latest betrayal. She'd protect them, shield them from this ugliness. And as for Leon's precious gifts, she'd return them all, every last one, and let him choke on his hollow victory. The week following the courtroom showdown passed in a haze of quiet determination for Valerie. Each day she devoted herself to the task of gathering Leon's gifts, a meticulous purge of the past that felt both cathartic and crushing. She moved through the house like a ghost, rummaging through closets, drawers, and dusty storage boxes tucked away in corners. Every item she uncovered, a velvet jewelry case, a sleek designer handbag, a delicate crystal vase, carried a memory, sharp and bittersweet. The emerald necklace he'd given her after Steve's birth, a symbol of their fragile reconciliation. The diamond earrings from Paris, a fleeting moment of joy in a crumbling marriage. The silver bracelet she'd worn to feel strong at events where she played the dutiful wife. One by one, she placed them into cardboard boxes, their weight heavier than their monetary value. The house was silent, save for the soft creak of floorboards and the rustle of tissue paper as she wrapped each item with care, as if preserving them for someone else's life. She worked methodically, her hands steady even as her heart ached. The kids were at school during the day and she was grateful for the solitude. It spared her from explaining why she was dismantling pieces of their shared history. But the hardest part came last. On the final evening, with the boxes of her own gifts sealed and stacked in the living room, Valerie steeled herself and stepped into Steve's bedroom. The room smelled faintly of his cologne and the lingering scent of the comic books he loved. Her eyes fell on the telescope by the window, a Christmas gift from Leon when Steve was 10, back when he'd spent hours teaching his son to name the stars. She hesitated, her fingers brushing the cool metal, then gently disassembled it, wrapping each piece in bubble wrap. Next, she gathered the leather-bound astronomy books Leon had given him, their pages still marked with Steve's careful notes. Her throat tightened as she placed them in a box, imagining Steve's confusion, his quiet anger when he learned his father wanted these back. Rose's room was even worse. The pastel walls and fairy lights felt like a sanctuary Valerie was violating. She knelt by the bed and lifted the music box Leon had given Rose for her 8th birthday, its delicate melody tinkling as she opened it. Rose had played it every night before bed, her small fingers tracing the carved roses on its lid. Valerie's vision blurred with tears as she wrapped it carefully, tucking it beside the stuffed unicorn Leon had bought during a rare family trip to the zoo. She added the charm bracelet Rose adored, its tiny ballet slipper and star pendants clinking softly as she packed it away. Each item felt like a theft, a betrayal of her children's trust, but Valerie pressed on, her resolve hardened by the memory of Leon's smug grin and Annabelle's predatory smile. When she finished, the boxes sat in the living room like silent sentinels, a testament to a life unraveled. Valerie sank onto the couch, exhaustion settling into her bones. She stared at the stack, her mind replaying the courtroom scene, Leon's audacity, Annabelle's glee, the judge's weary disbelief. A part of her wanted to call Duana, to ask if there was a way to fight this, to keep the children's gifts at least. But she dismissed the thought. Fighting would only prolong the pain, give Leon the satisfaction of seeing her struggle. No, she'd give him what he wanted and let him choke on it. The front door creaked open and Steve's voice called out, "Mom? You home?" Valerie straightened, wiping her eyes quickly. "In here, sweetheart," she said, forcing a smile as Steve and Rose appeared, backpacks slung over their shoulders. Steve's gaze landed on the boxes, his brow furrowing. "What's all this?" Rose peeked around him, her eyes wide. "Are we moving?" Valerie's heart clenched. She'd hoped to delay this conversation to shield them a little longer. "No, honey, we're not moving," she said softly, rising to meet them. "These are some things your dad asked for. Gifts he gave us over the years." Steve's expression darkened, his jaw tightening in a way that made him look far older than his 15 years. "What? Like your jewelry? That's so messed up." Rose clutched her backpack, her voice small. "Does that mean my music box too?" Valerie knelt before her, brushing a strand of hair from Rose's face. "Yes, sweetheart, I'm so sorry, but it's okay. We don't need those things to be happy, right? We've got each other." Rose's lip trembled, but she nodded, leaning into Valerie's embrace. Steve, however, stood rigid, his fists clenched. "He's taking my telescope, isn't he? After he promised we'd use it together this summer." Valerie stood, resting a hand on his shoulder. "I know it hurts, Steve. I wish I could change it. But your dad, he's made his choice. We're going to be okay without those things. I promise." With the boxes of Leon's gifts sealed and stacked in the living room, Valerie wiped her eyes, grabbed a notebook, and sat at the kitchen table, her resolve hardening. She decided to make a list of every item she was returning. A catalogue of Leon's greed laid bare. She wrote with precision, her pen scratching against the paper as she documented everything, from the extravagant to the trivial. The emerald necklace, valued at thousands, from their 5th anniversary. The diamond earrings from Paris, a reckless splurge during a rare happy trip. The silver bracelet, antique and irreplaceable, from a charity auction. The crystal vase, a housewarming gift for their first home. Designer handbags barely used, from years when Leon wanted her to look the part. Steve's telescope, a Christmas gift that had sparked his love for the stars. Rose's music box, its melody and nightly comfort. The charm bracelet with its tiny ballet slipper, a 10th birthday surprise. Even the cheap trinkets, a $60 souvenir mug from a family vacation, a $75 set of novelty pens Leon had tossed into Rose's Christmas stocking, a $55 model ship Steve had painstakingly assembled with his father's help. The list grew, sprawling across pages, an absurd inventory of a life dismantled. Valerie included every last item, no matter how small, her handwriting steady and deliberate. She wanted Leon to see the ridiculousness of his demand, to confront the pettiness of his actions in black and white. Let him and Annabelle sift through this pathetic haul, she thought. Let them choke on their victory when they realized how hollow it was. The list was more than a record. It was a declaration. She imagined delivering the boxes, the list tucked neatly inside, and Leon's face as he read it. Would he feel shame, doubt, or would Annabelle's laughter drown out any flicker of regret? It didn't matter. Valerie was done seeking validation from him. She closed the notebook and stood, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The boxes, the list, the memories, they were Leon's to claim. Valerie stood in the dim glow of her nearly empty living room, the weight of finality pressing against her chest. She resolved to pack one last box, a small, unassuming vessel for the relics of a life she wasn't ready to surrender. These weren't mere objects. They were fragments of her heart, each one heavy with memories she'd fought to keep. She knew she had no choice but to let them go, yet the act felt like betrayal. Her ex-husband's reaction loomed in her mind, unpredictable and sharp, like a storm gathering on the horizon. Would he unravel at the sight of them? Would he even care? One thing was certain. This box, carefully curated with pieces of their shared past, would be her final deliberate strike. A quiet, devastating blow meant to linger long after she was gone. On the appointed day, a delivery van rumbled to a stop outside Leon's sleek new apartment, its tires crunching against the curb. The driver and his loader, sweating in the late morning heat, grunted as they hefted several cardboard boxes onto the sidewalk, their edges taped tightly shut. Leon stood on the porch, arms crossed, a crooked grin spreading across his face. He thought he'd won, forced Valerie to bend, to acknowledge his superiority in this final petty power play. He had no inkling of what awaited him inside those boxes, no sense of the quiet defiance packed alongside the trinkets he'd demanded. "Sign here, sir," the driver said, thrusting a clipboard at Leon. He scrawled his name with a flourish, barely glancing at the receipt, and waved the men off. As the van pulled away, Leon surveyed the stack of boxes, his grin widening. This was his victory, tangible and neatly packaged. With Annabelle hovering nearby, her eyes bright with anticipation, Leon began hauling the boxes inside, one by one, into the pristine living room with its glass coffee table and cream-coloured sofa. The task was tedious, but Annabelle's excitement was infectious. She clapped her hands like a child on Christmas morning, her laughter echoing through the apartment. When he set down the last box, Leon wiped his brow and turned to her, his voice teasing. "Happy now, princess?" "Ecstatic," Annabelle purred, wrapping her arms around him. They kissed, her lips lingering on his, and Leon chuckled. "All right, let's clean up this mess and see what we've got." Annabelle wasted no time. She pounced on the boxes, her fingers tearing at the tape with eager precision. She zeroed in on one marked with Valerie's initials, ignoring the others in her frenzy. The box opened to reveal a treasure trove of Valerie's possessions, each item nestled in tissue paper like relics of a life discarded. Annabelle gasped, pulling out the emerald necklace, its stones catching the light in a cascade of green fire. "Oh, Leon, look at this!" she squealed, draping it around her neck. Next came the diamond earrings, which she clipped on with a delighted giggle, admiring her reflection in a nearby mirror. The silver bracelet followed, its antique links gleaming as she slipped it onto her wrist. She rifled through the rest, designer handbags, the crystal vase, cooing over each piece, modelling them like a child playing dress-up. "These are mine now," she declared, twirling in the living room, her voice dripping with triumph. Leon, meanwhile, turned to this one heavier, filled with the children's gifts. He sifted through it with a detached air, his fingers brushing against Steve's telescope, its metal cool to the touch. He set it aside, mentally calculating its resale value. Rose's music box came next, its carved lid intricate but meaningless to him now. He stacked it with the charm bracelet and a set of astronomy books, muttering to himself about posting them online. "These should fetch a decent price," he said, more to himself than to Annabelle, who was too engrossed in her new baubles to care. Then Annabelle opened a smaller box, its contents less glamorous. Inside were photographs, postcards, and a bundle of children's drawings, their edges curling with age. She frowned, lifting a crayon sketch of a tank Steve had drawn years ago, then a postcard from a family trip to the coast. Her lip curled in disdain. "Leon, this box is just worthless garbage," she said, tossing a handful of drawings onto the coffee table. "Throw it out with the trash." Leon glanced over, barely registering the contents. "Yeah, sure," he said, already gathering the empty cardboard boxes to flatten for recycling. He scooped up the smaller box, its contents untouched, and carried it to the garage along with a few other unopened ones, shoving them onto a shelf beside paint cans and forgotten gym equipment. To him, it was just clutter, insignificant compared to the glittering spoils Annabelle was fawning over. As Annabelle pranced around the living room, the emerald necklace glinting at her throat, Leon felt a flicker of satisfaction. He'd gotten what he wanted: Valerie's capitulation, Annabelle's delight, a tidy haul to sell or flaunt. But as he looked at the scattered drawings on the table, Rose's uneven flowers, Steve's lopsided planes, something stirred in his chest, faint and fleeting. He pushed it down, turning away to join Annabelle, who was now admiring the crystal vase on the mantel. "Worth every second of that court nonsense," Annabelle said, her voice smug as she adjusted the diamond earrings. Leon nodded, forcing a smile, but his eyes lingered on the garage door, where the small box sat forgotten. He didn't open it. He didn't need to. The victory was his, or so he told himself. Back at Valerie's house, the days following the delivery of Leon's demanded gifts were far from the triumphant release she'd initially felt. The act of packing up and letting go had been liberating at first, a quiet reclaiming of her dignity. But as the weeks wore on, the weight of it all settled over her like a suffocating fog. She was just beginning to glimpse light again, small moments of hope stitched into her days. A laugh with Rose over a silly movie, a rare open conversation with Steve. When the phone rang. The caller ID flashed an unfamiliar number, but Valerie answered, her voice cautious. "Hello?" "Valerie, darling, it's Annabelle." The voice was syrupy, dripping with a sweetness that set Valerie's nerves on edge. She froze, her grip tightening on the phone. Of all people, why was Annabelle calling? "What do you want?" Valerie asked, her tone flat, trying to steel herself against whatever was coming. "Oh, I just thought I'd check in. See how you're holding up," Annabelle said, her voice lilting with false concern. "It must be so hard going through all this. I mean, losing Leon, giving up all those lovely things." She paused, letting the words hang, and Valerie realized too late that this was a setup, a calculated jab disguised as pleasantries. Valerie closed her eyes, exhaling slowly, her free hand clenching into a fist. "I'm fine, Annabelle. Is there a point to this call?" Annabelle's laugh was light, almost musical, but it carried a razor's edge. "Well, I suppose I just wanted to share a little moment with you. Right now, as we're speaking, I'm wearing that gorgeous emerald necklace you sent over. It looks stunning on me, don't you think? Leon can't stop staring." Valerie's stomach twisted, the image searing into her mind. Annabelle preening in that necklace, the one Leon had given her after Steve's birth, a symbol of a love she'd thought was unbreakable. The anger she'd been suppressing, the rage she'd buried under layers of resolve and indifference, surged to the surface, hot and unrelenting. She pressed her lips together, willing herself to stay calm, to not give Annabelle the satisfaction of a reaction. "Good for you," she managed, her voice tight. But Annabelle wasn't done. She leaned into her cruelty, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You know what really turns me on, Valerie? Knowing I conquered a married man. Knowing I made him strip his ex-wife bare. Your jewelry, your kids' toys, your whole pathetic life. It's exhilarating." That was the breaking point. Valerie's restraint snapped like a taut wire, the anger she'd held back exploding into white-hot fury. "You think this is a game, Annabelle?" she spat, her voice trembling with rage. "You think you've won something? You're parading around in my old life like it's a trophy, but you're nothing but a scavenger picking at scraps. Leon didn't choose you because you're special. He chose you because you're easy. You're a distraction, a shiny toy he'll toss aside the second he gets bored. And trust me, he will." There was a stunned silence on the other end, and Valerie pressed on, her words sharp and unrelenting. "You want to gloat about that necklace? Go ahead. Wear it until it chokes you. But don't you dare call me again, acting like you've conquered anything. You're not worth my time, and neither is he." Annabelle's composure faltered, her voice rising in pitch. "How dare you—" "No, how dare you!" Valerie cut her off, her voice steady now, cold as steel. "You wanted a reaction? You got one. Now stay out of my life." She slammed the phone down, her hands shaking, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The weeks following Annabelle's venomous phone call were a descent into darkness for Valerie. Sleepless nights piled one atop another, her mind a relentless churn of memories and regrets. She'd try to sleep, but images of Leon's smug grin, Annabelle's predatory smile haunted her. The depression that had been simmering since the divorce surged, pulling her under like a riptide. Simple tasks, making breakfast, driving the kids to school, felt insurmountable. She hid her unraveling from Steve and Rose as best she could, but the cracks were showing, and the weight of it all became too much. One morning, after a night of staring at the ceiling, Valerie broke. She called Dwana, her voice trembling as she admitted she couldn't cope. Dwana, ever the steady anchor, arranged for Valerie to check into a psychiatric hospital for a week of intensive care. The decision was agonizing. Leaving Steve and Rose with her sister felt like another failure, but Valerie knew she couldn't be the mother they needed if she didn't get help. The hospital was a blur of therapy sessions, quiet rooms, and medication adjustments. She spoke little at first, the words trapped behind a wall of grief, but slowly, with the guidance of a kind therapist, she began to untangle the knots of pain, anger, and self-blame. By the time she was discharged, something had shifted. The hospital hadn't erased the hurt, but it had given her tools to face it. Valerie returned home with a fragile but growing sense of acceptance. She sat at her kitchen table one evening, a mug of chamomile tea warming her hands, and let the truth settle in her bones. Leon's betrayal, Annabelle's cruelty, the loss of those material tokens. They were real, and they had wounded her deeply. But they didn't define her. She wasn't the broken ex-wife they'd tried to make her feel like. She was Valerie Carter, mother of 2 incredible children, survivor of a marriage that had tested her strength, and a woman capable of forging a new path. She glanced at the living room where Steve was sprawled on the couch sketching in a notebook, and Rose was practicing a new dance routine, her laughter filling the air. Valerie's heart ached, but it was a softer ache now, laced with love rather than despair. She thought of the boxes she'd sent to Leon, the list she'd meticulously crafted, and Annabelle's gloating voice. Those things belonged to a chapter that was closed. The story she was writing now, her story, Steve's Rose's, was just beginning. "Mom, you okay?" Steve called, glancing up from his sketch. His voice held a quiet concern, the kind only a teenager who'd seen too much could muster. Valerie smiled, a real one this time, small but steady. "Yeah, sweetheart, I'm getting there." Rose twirled over, her ponytail bouncing. "Want to dance with me? It's fun." Valerie laughed, setting her mug down. "You know I'm terrible at it, but sure. Show me your moves." As she joined Rose, stumbling through the steps and laughing at her own clumsiness, Valerie felt a flicker of lightness she hadn't known in months. Acceptance wasn't a destination, she realized. It was a process, one she'd walk every day. But for the first time in a long while, she believed she could. With her children by her side, she'd build a life not defined by what she'd lost, but by what she still had, and what she'd yet to discover. Months later, as Valerie began to find her footing in her new life, snippets of news about Leon and Annabelle trickled in through a mutual friend, Kate. One crisp autumn afternoon, over coffee at a cozy cafe, Kate leaned in, her voice low with gossip. "You won't believe this, Val. Annabelle had a baby, a boy. Must have been pregnant during the divorce, but they kept it quiet." Valerie's spoon paused mid-stir, her heart giving a small, unexpected lurch. She hadn't thought of Annabelle in weeks, had been trying to focus on her own healing, on Steve and Rose. The news shouldn't have mattered, but it did, if only for a moment. "A boy," she repeated softly, picturing a tiny face caught in the chaos of Annabelle's world. "Are they married now?" Kate shook her head, her lips pursing. "Nope, still not married. And from what I hear, things aren't exactly rosy." She hesitated, then spilled the rest. Annabelle, it seemed, was a far cry from the glamorous victor she'd portrayed herself as. As a mother, she was neglectful, often leaving the baby unattended while she went on lavish shopping sprees, maxing out Leon's credit cards. Kate's sources, friends of friends mostly, whispered that Annabelle was on antidepressants, sleeping through much of the day, leaving the boy to cry in his crib. Worse, she'd been heard yelling at him, her patience fraying at the demands of motherhood. "It's a mess," Kate said, her voice heavy with disapproval. "That poor kid." Valerie listened, her expression calm but her mind churning. She thought of the emerald necklace Annabelle had gloated about, the way she'd revelled in her supposed triumph. Now that image felt hollow, replaced by the reality of a struggling woman and a neglected child. Valerie felt no satisfaction, only a quiet sadness for the baby, innocent and caught in the crossfire of his parents' dysfunction. Time passed, and Valerie focused on her own world, Rose's dance recitals, Steve's science fair projects, her own tentative steps back into painting, a passion she'd shelved during her marriage. But Kate's updates kept coming, each one painting a bleaker picture. One evening, as Valerie was folding laundry, her phone buzzed with Kate's name. She answered, bracing herself. "Val, you're not going to believe this," Kate said, her voice urgent. "Leon and Annabelle had a huge fight. Apparently he slapped her. Hard. She called the police and they took him in for the night. It's all over the neighborhood now." Valerie's breath caught. Leon had never raised a hand to her, not once, even in their darkest moments. The news unsettled her, not because she cared for him anymore, but because it revealed how far he'd fallen. "What happened?" she asked, her voice steady. Kate sighed. "From what I heard, it was about money. Annabelle's been spending like crazy, and Leon's stressed about the baby and work. They were screaming at each other, and he just lost it. Annabelle's pressing charges, or at least threatening to. It's a disaster." Valerie set down the shirt she'd been folding, her hands resting on the pile of laundry. She thought of the baby, barely a toddler, witnessing his parents' unraveling. "I feel sorry for that poor boy," she said quietly. "He doesn't deserve this. No kid does." Kate's voice softened. "You're too kind, Val. After everything they put you through, you're still thinking about that child." Valerie managed a small smile, though Kate couldn't see it. "It's not about them, Kate. It's about that baby. He's got no one looking out for him." The illusion of Leon and Annabelle's passionate romance began to crack not long after the boxes from Valerie arrived, their contents a fleeting triumph that couldn't sustain the fragile foundation of their relationship. Once the thrill of conquest, Leon claiming Valerie's possessions, Annabelle reveling in her spoils, faded, the reality of their life together set in. What had seemed like love, fiery and all-consuming, cooled into something far less glamorous. Leon, who had once seen Annabelle as his liberator, began to see her for what she was, a manipulator who'd played him as deftly as a chess grandmaster. He'd fallen for her trap, lured by her charm and confidence, only to find himself ensnared in a dynamic that drained him dry. Annabelle's demands were relentless. The financial ones were the least of it. Leon could handle her endless shopping sprees, the designer clothes piling up in their apartment, the extravagant dinners she insisted on. He'd grit his teeth and pay the bills, even as his bank account dwindled and his stress mounted. But her emotional demands were a labyrinth he couldn't navigate. She craved constant validation, her moods swinging like a pendulum. One moment showering him with affection, the next berating him for some perceived slight. "You don't appreciate me, Leon?" she'd snap, her voice sharp as she waved a glass of wine, her eyes glittering with accusation. "After everything I've done for you, you're still not enough." In the beginning, her unconventional preferences in bed had ignited a spark in Leon, a stark contrast to the predictable rhythm of his marriage to Valerie. But what once thrilled him turned dark, her desires pushing boundaries that left him uncomfortable, even repulsed. He complied at first, desperate to keep her satisfied, but the encounters grew hollow, leaving him feeling used rather than desired. Night after night, he'd retreat to the garage, the cold concrete floor his refuge. There, hidden among the clutter of unopened boxes from Valerie, he'd nurse a bottle of whiskey, the burn of alcohol a temporary escape from the chaos of his thoughts. Annabelle's control tightened like a noose. She monitored his every move, her accusations sharp and unrelenting. "You're drinking too much, Leon," she'd hiss, catching the faint whiff of liquor on his breath, her eyes narrowing with disdain. "You're pathetic." Yet she'd pour herself another martini, her hypocrisy glaring. Leon, once the confident man who'd strutted out of the courtroom with a smirk, felt like a puppy on a leash, yanked this way and that by her whims. He'd catch himself nodding to her demands, agreeing to her rants, just to avoid another screaming match. The apartment, once a symbol of his new life, felt like a cage. Things spiraled further, the fights growing uglier. The night he slapped her, his hand striking her cheek in a moment of blind frustration, was a low he'd never imagined sinking to. The police, the night in a cell, the neighbors' whispers. It was a wake-up call, but not the first. In the quiet of those garage nights, as the whiskey dulled his senses, a thought had begun to creep in, insidious and persistent. He'd been wrong. At the start of his affair with Annabelle, he'd convinced himself he'd found true love, that Valerie had been the anchor holding him back from happiness. Annabelle's vibrancy, her boldness, had seemed like everything he'd been missing. But now, staring at the wreckage of his life, he wondered if he'd been too quick, too reckless, to make those bold moves. The garage was Leon's sanctuary, a dim, cluttered refuge where he could escape Annabelle's relentless demands. One evening, after another barbed argument over her latest shopping spree, he slipped inside, his hands trembling with the need for his hidden bottle of vodka. He rummaged through the shelves, shoving aside paint cans and forgotten gym equipment, his frustration mounting as the bottle eluded him. His fingers grazed the edge of an unopened box, one of the ones Valerie had sent, tearing off the lid with a reckless tug. He froze. Inside, neatly packed, were hundreds of photographs, stacked and tied with delicate ribbons. Leon's breath caught as he lifted one bundle, his fingers fumbling with the knot. The images spilled free, and happy faces stared back at him. His own, younger and unburdened. Valerie's, radiant with a smile he hadn't seen in years. Little Steve's, smeared with ice cream. Rose's, framed by pigtails. There they were at the seaside, tanned and laughing, the waves crashing behind them. There at an amusement park, arms wrapped around each other on a carousel. There at home by the Christmas tree, surrounded by torn wrapping paper and glowing lights. On the back of each photo, Valerie's careful calligraphic handwriting noted the details. Our first vacation together, 2010. I'm so happy. Steve is 3 here, 2012. He loves cotton candy. The best New Year of our lives, 2015. Leon's throat tightened, a lump forming as his eyes burned. He set the photos aside, his hands shaking, and reached for another stack. These were children's drawings, their colours faded but vivid with memory, crooked houses under lopsided suns, clumsy stick figures holding hands. Each was signed in a child's unsteady scrawl. I love Dad. Dad is the strongest. Dad is the best. Leon's chest ached, the words piercing through the haze of his denial. He hadn't seen these in years, hadn't realized Valerie had kept them, preserved them like treasures. He kept digging, unable to stop. There were cards he'd written to Valerie in the early years, their edges worn from handling. Romantic poems penned in his fervent handwriting, declarations of love that felt like they belonged to another man. You're my forever, Val. I'll never let you go. Promises of eternal fidelity, now mocking in their brokenness. Beneath them, a stack of Steve's and Rose's school notebooks, filled with their childish gratitude. Thank you, Mommy, for helping me with math. I got an A. Thank you, Daddy, for explaining how to solve the problem. Leon's vision blurred, tears spilling silently as he traced the words, the weight of what he'd thrown away crashing over him. The garage door creaked open and Annabelle's voice cut through the silence, sharp with irritation. What the heck are you doing in here, Leon? I've been calling you for 10 minutes. Leon didn't look up. He sat frozen, a drawing of a stick figure family clutched in his hand, the words, Dad is the best, staring back at him. His silence only fueled Annabelle's annoyance. She stormed closer, her heels clicking on the concrete. Are you ignoring me? What's all this junk? She peered over his shoulder, her lip curling at the sight of the photos and drawings. Oh, great. More of Valerie's garbage. Why are you wasting time on this? Leon's jaw tightened, but he said nothing, his fingers tightening around the drawing. He pulled out another photo, Valerie laughing as Rose smeared cake on her face at a birthday party, and Annabelle's scoff grated against his nerves. Pathetic, she muttered. Get rid of it, Leon. We don't need her trash cluttering up our space. He finally looked at her, his eyes raw with something she couldn't read, grief, anger, clarity. It's not trash, he said, his voice low, unsteady but firm. "These are my kids, my family." Annabelle blinked, caught off guard by the steel in his tone. "Your family?" she sneered, recovering quickly. "You mean the one you left? Don't get all sentimental now. You wanted this life, Leon. You chose me." He stared at her, the woman he'd once thought was his salvation, and saw her clearly for the first time. The manipulation, the control, the chaos she thrived on. It wasn't love. It was a trap, and he'd walked into it willingly, blinded by his own discontent. "I was wrong," he said quietly, the words slipping out before he could stop them. Annabelle's eyes narrowed, her voice rising. "What did you just say?" But Leon didn't answer. He turned back to the box, his hands moving gently now, reverently, as he gathered the photos and drawings, tucking them back into their ribbons. He stood, the box cradled in his arms, and brushed past her without a word, heading into the apartment. Annabelle's shouts followed him. "Don't you dare walk away from me!" But they felt distant, insignificant. Leon stood in the dim glow of the living room, the open box from Valerie at his feet, its contents spilling across the coffee table like a map of a life he'd abandoned. His hands trembled as he reached for the large folder at the bottom, its weight heavy with significance. He opened it, expecting more photos or drawings, but instead found hundreds of receipts, meticulously organized in plastic sleeves. Each one was for the children: clothing, shoes, toys, books, tuition for educational programs. Valerie's neat handwriting labeled them: Steve's winter coat, 2021, $85. Rose's new boots, 2022, $60. Steve's science camp, 2023, $450. Rose's ballet classes, 2024, $320. Leon's breath grew shallow as he flipped through the folder, his fingers brushing the faded ink. He grabbed a calculator from a nearby drawer, his movements frantic, and began tallying the amounts. Within minutes, the numbers painted a stark truth. The total Valerie had spent on Steve and Rose in recent years dwarfed the value of every gift he'd demanded back: the jewelry, the telescope, the music box, all of it. Thousands upon thousands of dollars poured into their well-being, their growth, their happiness, while he'd been fixated on reclaiming trinkets to appease Annabelle's greed. Then he saw it, a small piece of paper clipped to the final receipt, its edges crisp, as if Valerie had placed it there with deliberate care. Her handwriting, steady and elegant, filled the page with just a few lines, but they struck him like a blade. "I returned everything you wanted back. All the photos, drawings, cards, notebooks, receipts, jewelry and gadgets, all the material values. But the things you never gave, love, care, support, attention, I kept for myself and the kids. That's something you can never take from us." The paper slipped from his hands, fluttering to the floor. Leon's knees buckled and he sank onto the couch, the world around him crumbling. The weight of Valerie's words pressed into him, each one a mirror reflecting his failures. He hadn't just lost money or possessions, he'd lost a family, a love that had been real and enduring, a version of himself he barely recognized anymore. The photos of seaside vacations, the drawings proclaiming, the cards filled with his own promises of forever. They were relics of a life he'd traded for Annabelle's fleeting allure, for a hollow existence that now mocked him. Annabelle's voice sliced through the silence, sharp with disdain. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, her eyes flicking over the scattered contents of the box. "So what are you going to do with all this junk now?" she asked, her tone dripping with impatience. "Throw it away or sit here crying over old photos like a loser?" Leon didn't respond. He stared at the box, at the folder of receipts, at Valerie's note lying on the floor. Her words echoed in his mind. Love, care, support, attention. He'd given so little of those, convinced himself that child support payments and occasional gifts were enough. But Valerie had been the one there, day after day, stitching their family together while he chased a mirage. And now, surrounded by the tangible remnants of his past, he saw the truth. He'd traded genuine love for Annabelle's shallow admiration, real values for shiny tinsel. The fruits of his selfishness and foolishness were bitter, and they were his alone to bear. "Leon!" Annabelle snapped, stepping closer, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "Are you even listening to me? This is pathetic. Get rid of it." One quiet afternoon, Valerie's phone buzzed, and the name on the screen stopped her cold. Leon. She hesitated, her thumb hovering over the answer button, then picked up, her voice cautious. "Hello?" "Valerie, it's me," Leon said, his tone softer than she'd ever heard it. I need to apologize. For everything. The divorce, the gifts, the way I treated you and the kids. I was wrong, and I'm so sorry." He paused, his breath shaky. "I'd like to meet, if you're willing, just to talk." Valerie's heart stuttered, a mix of shock and something else, something she hadn't expected to feel. Was it a flicker of the love she'd once held for him, buried beneath layers of pain, or just the surprise of his humility? She ended the call politely, promising to think it over, but as she sat in her kitchen, staring at the phone, thoughts of giving him a second chance crept in. Could he have changed? Could there be a way to mend things, if not for them, then for Steve and Rose? The idea felt reckless, yet it tugged at her, stirring a hope she wasn't sure she trusted. Needing clarity, Valerie called the one person she knew would cut through her confusion, her best friend, Dakota. "Can we meet?" she asked, her voice urgent. "I need to talk." They met at their favorite cafe, a cozy spot with mismatched chairs and the warm scent of fresh coffee. Valerie spilled everything, Leon's call, his apology, the unexpected stirrings in her heart. Dakota listened, her expression darkening with every word. When Valerie finished, Dakota set her mug down with a deliberate thud, her eyes blazing with conviction. "Val, listen to me," Dakota said, her voice firm, no trace of her usual warmth. "Do not let Leon near you. Not under any circumstances. Nothing good will come of this." Valerie blinked, caught off guard by the intensity. But he sounded different, like he's really sorry. "Sorry," Dakota cut in, leaning forward. "Valerie, let's recap. This man betrayed you. He lied to you, cheated on you with Annabelle, and then had the audacity to demand your jewelry and the kids' gifts back like you were some pawn shop. He demeaned you, humiliated you in court with that absurd stunt, denigrated everything you built together. Where was his conscience then? He didn't have one." Valerie's throat tightened, the memories flooding back. Leon's smug grin in the courtroom, Annabelle's predatory glee, the boxes she'd packed with trembling hands. Dakota wasn't done. "Think about how he announced the divorce," she pressed. "Cold, dismissive, like you were nothing. He moved on without a backward glance, flaunting Annabelle while you were picking up the pieces for Steve and Rose. He didn't care about your pain, Val. He didn't care about the kids. And now what? He's sorry because his shiny new life with Annabelle imploded. That's not remorse. That's convenience." Valerie stared into her coffee, the steam curling upward, her mind a tug of war between Dakota's words and that faint, foolish hope. I thought maybe he's realized what he lost. Maybe he wants to make things right." Dakota's voice softened, but her resolve didn't waver. "Val, given all he's done, why the heck would you give this insidious asshole a moment of your time? He didn't love you, not the way you deserved. Love doesn't destroy someone and then come crawling back when the grass isn't greener. He's not here for you. He's here because he's lost control of his own mess." She reached across the table, gripping Valerie's hand. "Please do yourself a favor. Refuse to meet him. You've fought so hard to rebuild your life, to be strong for yourself and the kids. Don't let him drag you back into his chaos. You're worth more than his half-baked apologies." Valerie's eyes stung, Dakota's words cutting through the fog of her emotions like a beacon. Dakota was right. Leon's apology, sincere or not, couldn't erase the wreckage he'd left behind, and she didn't owe him a second chance, not after everything. "You're right," Valerie said finally, her voice steady, a weight lifting from her chest. "I won't meet him. I'm done letting him have power over me." Dakota's face softened into a proud smile. "That's my girl. You've got this, Val. You've got everything you need right here." She tapped Valerie's chest, right over her heart. That evening, Valerie sat at her kitchen table, a blank canvas propped nearby, and drafted a text to Leon. "I appreciate your apology, but I'm not interested in meeting. I've moved on, and I wish you well. Please don't contact me again." She hit send, then set the phone down, her hands steady. She turned to the canvas, picking up a brush, and began painting, a bold stroke of red, vibrant and unapologetic. Her life, her love, her strength, they were hers, and no one, not even Leon, could take them away. At home, Steve and Rose were sprawled in the living room, arguing playfully over a board game. Valerie joined them, laughing as Rose tried to sneak an extra turn. This was her world, whole and enough. Leon's call was a ripple, not a wave, and she'd already weathered the storm. Months after Valerie's resolute decision to close the door on Leon, her life had settled into a rhythm of quiet fulfillment. The art gallery where she worked part-time had become a second home, her paintings earning praise and a small but growing following. Steve was thriving in his final year of high school, his science projects winning awards, while Rose's dance performances lit up local recitals. The house, once shadowed by the pain of the divorce, now hummed with laughter, creativity, and the warmth of a family that had weathered the worst and come out stronger. Valerie's heart, though scarred, was whole again, filled with the love she poured into her children and the life she'd built on her own terms. She kept Leon's apology at a distance, a faint echo that no longer stirred her. Kate's occasional updates, Leon and Annabelle's final split, his struggles to reconnect with their son, were met with a nod and a change of subject. Valerie's focus was forward, not back. She'd framed more of Rose's drawings, hung new paintings in the living room, and even started hosting small gatherings with friends like Dakota, whose fierce loyalty had been a lifeline. Life wasn't perfect, but it was hers, and that was enough. One crisp spring morning, Valerie was at the gallery, arranging a new exhibit of local artists, when a woman approached her. She was in her late 50s with sharp eyes and a warm smile, introducing herself as Eleanor Grayson, a curator from a prestigious art institute in the city. "I've been following your work," Eleanor said, gesturing to one of Valerie's vibrant abstracts, a swirl of blues and golds inspired by her children's dreams. "It's raw, powerful. You have a gift." Valerie blushed, unaccustomed to such praise. "Thank you, that means a lot." Eleanor's smile widened. "I'm curating a national exhibition next month, and I'd like to feature your work. 3 pieces, prominently displayed. It's a big opportunity, Valerie. Your story, your resilience, it's in every brushstroke. People need to see it." Valerie's breath caught, her mind reeling. A national exhibition? Her work seen by thousands? It was a dream she'd never dared to voice, a validation of the passion she'd rediscovered after years of putting it aside. I'd be honored," she stammered, her heart racing. "There's more," Eleanor added, her eyes twinkling. "We have a grant program for emerging artists. I'd like to nominate you. It comes with funding for a solo show, a stipend to support your work, and mentorship to take your career to the next level. You're exactly the kind of artist we want to champion." Tears prickled Valerie's eyes, but she laughed, a sound of pure, unfiltered joy. "I don't know what to say. This is incredible." "Say yes," Eleanor said warmly. "You've earned it." Valerie did, and the weeks that followed were a whirlwind. She selected her best pieces for the exhibition, poured her heart into new ones, and felt a spark of pride she hadn't known was possible. When she told Steve and Rose, they whooped and hugged her, Rose declaring, "Mum, you're going to be famous." Steve, ever the pragmatist, grinned and said, "Just don't forget us when you're a big shot." Dakota, over wine at their next coffee date, toasted her with a fierce, "I told you, Val, you're unstoppable." The twist, though, came on the night of the exhibition's opening. The gallery was alive with people, critics, collectors, locals, all buzzing around Valerie's paintings, their colours glowing under the lights. Valerie, dressed in a simple but elegant black dress, moved through the crowd, accepting compliments with a gracious smile. Steve and Rose were there beaming with pride, and Dakota hovered nearby, snapping photos like a proud parent. As Valerie spoke with a critic, a familiar figure caught her eye across the room, standing by her largest painting, a bold canvas titled Reclamation. It was Leon. He looked different, older, his face lined with a weariness that hadn't been there before. He stood alone, hands in his pockets, staring at the painting as if it held answers he couldn't find. Valerie's heart skipped, not with longing, but with surprise. She hadn't invited him, hadn't spoken to him since her text refusing his meeting. How had he known? She excused herself and approached, her steps measured, her expression neutral. "Leon," she said, her voice calm. "What are you doing here?" He turned, startled, and for a moment she saw the man from the photos in that box, vulnerable, human. I heard about your exhibition," he said, his voice low. "Kate mentioned it. I didn't come to bother you, Valerie. I had to see it. Your work? It's incredible." She studied him, searching for manipulation, but found none. His eyes were red-rimmed, his posture defeated. "Thank you," she said, keeping her distance. "But why are you really here?" Leon swallowed, glancing at the painting, its swirls of colour a testament to her strength. "I found the box," he said quietly. "The photos, the drawings, your note. It broke me, Val. I've been trying to make things right, reaching out to Steve and Rose, starting therapy, trying to be a better father to my son. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I needed you to know. I see what I lost, and I'm proud of you. You're everything I wasn't." Valerie's breath caught, but she didn't soften. She didn't need his validation anymore. "I appreciate that," she said, her voice steady. "But this," she gestured to the gallery, the crowd, her children laughing nearby. "This is mine. I built it without you. I wish you well, Leon, but my life doesn't include you anymore." He nodded, a flicker of pain crossing his face, but he didn't argue. "I understand," he said. I hope the kids might let me try one day." "That's up to them," Valerie said, her tone firm but not unkind. "Good luck, Leon." She turned away, rejoining Steve and Rose, who hadn't noticed Leon's presence. As she hugged them, the weight of his words faded, replaced by the joy of the moment. The unexpected twist wasn't Leon's appearance, it was the realization that his remorse, his regret, no longer held power over her. She was free, truly free, and the world was opening to her in ways she'd never imagined. As the night wound down, Eleanor pulled Valerie aside, handing her a letter confirming the grant and a check for the first stipend. "You're going places, Valerie," she said. "This is just the beginning." Valerie smiled, tucking the letter into her purse. She looked at her children, at Dakota's proud grin, at the paintings that told her story. Leon's shadow had passed, a brief ripple in her sea of triumph. The twist, the happiest one, was that her future was hers, bright and